We're very pleased to be joined by Lars and Mal, our musical guests tonight. And after our musical feature, we will be moving into the Brew just free-flowing discussion about the subject tonight, and also any subject you may want to pick up about life and faith. The only ground rules are no question or comment is considered too stupid or too irreverent. So, get them on the internet, think about them here, and
gather your communion elements.
And gather your communion elements for the end of the program. That's right. Good to have you with us for the first time on Darkwood Brew. Yay. What can you tell us about yourselves?
Yeah, we go by Lars and Mal. My name's Laura.
I'm Mallory.
We're both from Omaha, and we play around the different venues from time to time. And usually we play with a band that supports us, but tonight it's just Mal and I.
Cool. Well, the burning question tonight is, if God could ask you for one thing, what would you ask for?
Mallory?
Are you sure you want me to go first?
I was thinking about it. I don't have an answer necessarily for me, but something that just in my own time I've been thinking about lately is how we can have less social exclusion. And I think that's something that, I don't know. That's just one thing I'm thinking of.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Nice.
I guess for me, personally, I would ask for courage to make measured, deliberate decisions in my life, just to be steadfast and consistent in the way that I interact with other people and interact with myself, I guess. Wonderful.
Thanks. What are you playing for us tonight?
Yeah, this song is called Little One.
Hey.
Yeah, thank you. My legs follow you into your field and into you. After it all, your city will call my young name. And I don't know what you gotta do to make me fall for you. Hold me down, little one, make my heart break. La da da da, la da 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 da, la da 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 da, la da da da. You gotta do to make me fall for you. Hold me down, little one, make my heart break.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One of the things I forgot to mention early on was our cookie of the week this week is coconut macaroons.
Ah,
And
your husband picked them out.
Yes, my husband Scott picked these out because we didn't get to Melvin in time to get his recipe, so we'll have to ask Melvin to send us one. But these are Ina Garten's recipe for coconut macaroons. She is the Barefoot Contessa from the Food Network, and that's where this recipe came from. So we'll make sure we get that up online so that you can have it as well. But you can always look it up. They're really good. That's 2 weeks in a row for coconut. Yay! And we have a question from online still with Randy. Randy?
Yes, they had some good discussion online on the chat tonight. One question from Zeus on the Solomon discussion. There's a biblical question here about differentiation and communion. What is the biblical line or wisdom here?
The biblical line between differentiation and communion. So, like, how do we be perhaps unified and different at the same time?
Unique and plural,
Unique
I
and
think.
yeah.
Is that the language?
It,
Maybe that's the same or no?
I got differentiation and communion.
yeah. I think in a lot of the Bible, that really gets into like identity. Like how are we alike with? How would we share common ground with other people, and how are we different from them? And the Bible, a lot of it has kind of two voices that sound completely contradictory to each other, and yet they are related. One says basically we're not related. That's the the voice of Israel as it goes into Canaan and says we need to clear this land of the Canaanites and don't make alliances with their gods and their peoples and they need to be done. And so you are absolutely unique, and so your relationship with them is simply to clear them out and then somehow become this blessing that will bless others through your doing this. But another form that you find even in Deuteronomy, where you find this first form, is very much related. They see us as deeply related to the other peoples, including there was an understanding in early Israel. They believed in Yahweh as the high God, but they didn't believe that Yahweh is the only God. That Yahweh was the only God for Israel, but not necessarily for everybody else. But in contrast to the polytheistic cultures, they didn't believe that these other gods could challenge the will of Yahweh. So they were okay if Moab had worshiped their god and the Ammonites had their god and so forth for them, as long as they didn't say, well, that's your god. They just felt like to the extent that these gods were real, they could only ever carry out the will of Yahweh. And so they were kind of okay with that. They saw that the other gods and the other peoples were responding to a will that was related to Yahweh's, but they felt that Yahweh was going straight to the source. And I think that's kind of where Solomon was at too, in saying he marries these women and from other cultures, and along with them takes in their gods. And I think he's actually he's responding to this intuition that Yahweh, he, at least at first, is still perceiving himself as a Yahweh follower. I'm following Yahweh. I'm just simply bringing in these others who are worshiping gods. They're in the end, we're all alike, right? We're all the same. So let's make some peace. And that's a good kind of progressive liberal move, right?
Right, exactly.
But at the same time, what happens is, in a sense, I think what he ends up doing is merging them all. Kind of like, because not all these different gods, as they're in their religious practices, are Yahweh. Are pointing to Yahweh. And so as you start to make these alliances and bring these gods in and try to organize your kingdom so it's actually acknowledging the service of these multiple gods, it's actually bifurcating their loyalties and causing the troubles. And so I think that the key there is, you talk about the diversity and the unity, is if you're going to be loving and peace-loving to people who have different beliefs and different gods, that's great. But do that in order to develop your own tradition, in its fullest. Don't smash them together and say we're going to be a little bit Yahweh, a little bit Kamosh, a little bit Molech, and
a little bit country.
We're going to a little bit country, a little bit rock and roll, a little bit liberal, a little bit conservative. We're going to bring it all together. It's like you can't bring it all together. At some point they're just not reconcilable. And so be in conversation, rich conversation, respectful conversation, learn from each other, but then use those learnings to actually deepen your knowledge and to your own tradition.
Yeah, it's a strength in your own tradition when you're able to explain to other people what it is about your own tradition that brings you joy. And that's not changing your direction in the path that you're walking. It's in fact strengthening it while you're still honoring other people's ability to do the same in their tradition.
Yeah, think about like Jews, Muslims, and Christians. We all worship the exact same God. Each tradition acknowledges,
Right.
we're all the God of Abraham. That's our God. But even then, we can't just simply smash them all together and say, let's be a little Jewish, a little bit Christian, a little bit Muslim. We can enter into really deep relationship and acknowledge we all worship the other God. We each have our own flavor, And so you still, even at that close level, you still have to keep them separate so that they each can develop the depth of their tradition. So if it doesn't work when you're even talking about the same acknowledged God, you're going to start to bring in all these other gods.
Right.
It just starts to break down.
Differentiation.
Yeah.
Without watering anything down.
We have a question in the room.
I frame it in the form of a question. I was thinking, isn't it better to have a king who fails than a king who succeeds? A king who actually succeeds in expanding the kingdom and amassing wealth and authority is probably not spending much of his time doing God's work. Wouldn't you rather have a king who is attempting to be idealistic and is thus destined to fail? I'd rather emulate or admire a king or a leader who fails than one who succeeds. One who succeeds by definition in worldly matters, such that he's recorded in the history books as successful. I think I would pretty much tend to dismiss. If he was tragic, I might, seen as good but tragically failed. Those are the ones that I would tend to admire, I would think.
Yeah, you and not 90% of the rest of the nation, huh? Yeah.
People who want a father figure.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
Reagan as opposed to Carter. You have, the anti-intellectualism. People who want strength in a leader. People who, as opposed to idealistic intellectualism that may or may not achieve anything.
Yeah, and I think even the story, in the book of First Kings, it recognizes that Solomon did some amazing things. It really gives him full run, very full credit for what he did. That did bring in this time of peace and prosperity. At the same time, it does really say, he enslaved our people basically for all practical purposes. He certainly enslaved others, and this was just plain wrong, and his heart got diverted. And I don't think they're thinking too bad we couldn't have just been small and poor and all this, but how about what if we could have achieved even half of what we did and remain true to the tradition, to be sure. But in a sense, I think the wisdom in the book of Kings is that it doesn't just simply cast off Solomon. It actually gives him some credit, and you can't really be too critical of any person, I think, or community unless you're willing to give them credit at the same time and see the good they've done. And I think that's a good object lesson for us too, especially in all the political infighting and the religious infighting. It's like, unless we can give the other side some credit for some good stuff, we really don't have a lot of ground to jab them.
Yeah, I think that whole concept of polarization that I hear coming through, it's either Reagan or it's Carter. It's either success or it's failure. It's that kind of either or thing. When you're claiming your God and calling forth the unique voice of a person and what they're called to be about in the world, there's multiple voices, there's multiple choices, there's multiple directions into the same issue. So it's not an either or situation. You might have 5 or 6 people working on the same topic from a different direction. And so you've got all different unique voices that blend into that whole conversation. And I think that's really important. But I also think that that idea that you had that we talked about earlier, Eric, where you said that wisdom is the pillar here that we're talking about, but also we need to know that wisdom isn't the end of all things, that there is something higher than wisdom even. And if you're listening for that in the midst of your wisdom, then that'll be the thing that pulls you from going too far into that successful role that you're talking about, or too far into that compassion that you lose the sense of yourself.
That's a really good point. I think both of you are making, and I think about, like, can you imagine a conversation between God and Jesus before Jesus actually comes to earth? You know, God like trying to convince Jesus, like, go, I've got this mission for you. You know, okay, come down, you'll be born in utter poverty, amongst a people who is really struggling. They've been beaten up by country after country for century after century. They're kind of stressed out. In fact, they're really stressed out at this point. And life is going to be hard. The political leaders are all going to be against you. The religious leaders, most of the religious leaders are going to be against you. And Jesus is saying, oh, okay, now what's the good part of this story? And by the way, you're going to be tortured and you're going to be crucified. And Jesus say, okay, well, I can see how that could all be worth it because I'm going to convert the world, right? He goes, well, actually, you'll have 12 that will be utterly converted. And in fact, one of them is going to betray you. It's like you'll have 11. You'll have 11 people.
Hardly world peace, right? Hardly world peace.
Yeah. And what person's going to say, that's a wise decision? Go.
Wise move.
But it's the obedience thing. It's this trust that there is a view in this picture that is larger than I can comprehend. The God of the universe is asking me to do this, and the God of the universe has a little bit bigger view than mine. And
it's not just one pillar that makes a house, right? There are several. So you have to know that while you're raising up wisdom, there's more to it than that. There's going to be other pillars that are involved. And everybody has a different voice. If your voice is the wisdom voice, then there's another voice out there that needs to be calling you to your voice, and you need to be working with them in theirs.
I have another question.
Hi.
My original question was basically, I can't get past the part where God just appears to Solomon. Right there? Oh. Can you hear me now?
You're good.
Yeah,
and
good.
So I guess my original question was, how do you get your calling? Like, I'm really hoping I don't lose perspective, but it would be nice to just get the call, But also, I listened to Radio Lab podcast the other day, today, and they were talking about translation. And every time you give us the translation in Hebrew, it's fascinating to me. And so then I got to looking at it, and it says he appeared in a dream by night. And I'm curious if there's a different translation of how that could tell me how to get my calling.
Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Yes.
Obviously,
the
it's
sleepy
been
time
lost
tea is
in
not working.
translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, there are several translations out there. One of the things you can do on your own, Leslie, just for fun, is online. There are lots of different translations out there of the Bible. So when you go to do your devotions, look up the same text from the King James, from the New Revised Standard, from the New English Version, from the CEV, from the
lots of them out there.
Lots of them. New International Version. There's a ton of different versions out there. So if you go to like Bible Gateway, it'll tell you all the different versions, and you'll be able to see them like kind of side by side, and you'll be able to see how different people interpret it in different ways.
And surely your calling will be contained in one of those versions.
The secret is all hidden there somewhere. No. No, but it fills you with the curiosity to see how somebody might have taken a different nuance in the translation, and then from that point you might gain an insight that you didn't have before, is all.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
That whole calling thing, there's kind of the two classic paths to finding your calling. One is the path of glory, where you just kind of get this really strong sense of like, oh my God, this is the most wonderful thing. You see a painting and it slays you, and like, that's my path. Yeah, I see it clearly. That's the path that some people take. The other path is far more common. It's the path of despair. and that path comes from basically trying all these other paths that aren't working, and through the experiences of the struggles on those paths, also kind of an awakening to like, this ain't working me. I wish I was doing this. So this ain't working. I wish I was doing this, and discovering that I wish I was doing, or I'd rather be doing, start pointing in a similar direction. I think a lot of it's kind of like walking through a dark wood, and these little crumbs that we find along the path that kind of you connect the dots, these aha moments, these sweet spot moments, these times when something clicks into place, and we think, I feel joy in doing, what was it that made me feel such joy in doing what I was doing, or fantasizing about what I was fantasizing about doing, and seeing a consistent kind of enough of these little pieces of bread that you start thinking, oh, this is generally leading in this direction, so maybe I'll at least take a first step towards that, in that direction, and see how it goes, and then the next step and the next step. We rarely get the whole thing, a calling revealed to us, and I think that nobody has the sense of like crystal clear calling. We're always working it out in small steps, but it is always in small steps, and eventually you make enough small steps, you realize, oh, I'm headed someplace. I look back. It's more you look back, you say, oh, that path feels good. I want to continue in it.
And I do think we rely on each other to call to that voice inside the other person and to bring out their own unique voice. I remember leaving the Master of Divinity program at the seminary because everybody else in my group had these wonderfully clear callings. and I was like, I just was curious. So it was like, okay, I'm clearly not supposed to be here. But it was, you may not have even met the person yet who has that ability to call that voice out in you. And in the meantime, you're preparing yourself, you're thinking about things, you're comparing translations, you're having conversations with people that as those, little by little, those voices are being called out in you, whether you notice them or not. And it is a very step-by-step kind of a process, and you won't even notice it until years later sometimes. So that's the thing about calling, is that if a unique voice inside of you that leads you to do a specific thing or a specific task is something that just brings you joy from within, and if you're feeling that, then the track is there.
Well, that's a good note to finish up the brouhaha on. We're going to take a quick break and come back with communion. So if you want to gather elements online, we'd love to welcome you to this great meal. So we ended the brouhaha with this idea of calling, and one of the pieces that came up early in discussion is Jesus is in. I think Zeus mentioned Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, praying, "Thy will be, your will be done, God." And there's a sense in which Jesus, how does he know that God's will is going to be done in what's going to happen to him, in a broken body, in shed, blood. Did he have a dream? Was there a flashing neon sign saying, "Hey, this is a good thing, crucifixion"?
This way.
Yeah. What is it that gave Jesus the intuition of his own sense of being called, strong enough to say, you know what, I know I can avoid this, but I deliberately choose of my own free will not to actually let this happen to me? And could he have known even what the reason would, what the reason for this would be? Do we even know what the reason is, fully? Even today, we continue to to ponder that, and yet we find ourselves like moth to a flame, drawn to this meal, not fully understanding what we're doing, yet with this deep intuition that good was accomplished. I think Jesus, however that intuition came to him, what would have it felt like in his gut, you know? To me, that sign that you're being called into something is the most consistently sign in that is that you experience a sense of peace and even quiet joy, even if you're being called into something incredibly hard and intellectually you may struggle with, but you sense this deep inner peace. And again, maybe even a quiet joy. And I guess I would assume that Jesus, however that came to him, the original intuition through a dream, through a prayer, through whatever, that somehow the breaking of his body and the shedding of his blood must have produced that, even then, that sense, it's okay. You know, and like, what? Oh my God, no, this can't be right. But yet this feeling like it's okay. And that feeling that I'm at home in doing this. And if I'm at home in doing this, okay, your will be done. I can't make sense of this, but I trust your will. And so it happens. And 2,000 years later, we're still celebrating this meal. Still remembering a love that exceeds our wildest imagination to comprehend, and a grace that is deeper than the ocean, taken into our very bodies every week in the name of Christ. These are the gifts of God for the people of God. I invite you to enjoy the feast. Amen. Thanks for joining us tonight. And thank you for joining us tonight at Darkwood Brew. Very much looking forward to next week as well, where we'll be joined by Rachel Hockenberg. And she's really part of a new, young and vibrant generation of ministers who are very much committed to a more expansive faith and also yet a spiritually deep faith at the same time. And a very exciting person. We're looking forward to having her, and we'll be discussing or exploring the pillar of humility, which may sound like, it's like, how great is humility? Oh, I think you'll be pleased next week. Look forward to joining you then. Until then.
Very little pride.
I'm talking about her, not me. I'm going to be sitting at her feet for this. But I'm the most humble person I know. I'm very proud of it.
There you go. Knew that was coming.
Anyway, until then, my friends, may the Spirit of the living God, made known to us most fully in Jesus Christ our Lord, go before you to show you the way, go above you to watch over you, go behind you to push you into places you may not necessarily go yourself, go beneath you to uphold you and uplift you, go beside you to be your strong and constant companion, and dwell within you to remind you that you are not alone. You are loved beyond your wildest imagination. And may the fire of God's blessing burn brightly upon you and within you, now and always. Amen.
In the middle of the forest, under the shadows of the trees, I had wandered through the darkness until the way was lost to me. But it was there I heard a calling, and it was there I found belief. It was then that I found courage in the hour of my need. And I walk on foot with the faith and trust to guide me through the darkest wood. Darkwood. In the valley of the shadows, there is nothing I shall fear. 'Cause if the dark should overwhelm me, I know the light would soon